Hello, lovies. We are back again with another a little perspective, and it's a special one because it is Adoption Awareness Month. And I have asked one of my favorite Facebook friends, Jennifer Barlow, to chat with me about her experiences as being an adopting mom. And so I'm super excited to have Jennifer here. We started this series last month for dwarfism awareness, and both of her children do have dwarfism. So it's a double whammy, and it worked out really nicely. I'm so glad that you agreed to do this. I know it's not your thing, but I'm super excited to spread this awareness about both adoption and dwarfism awareness. So, Jennifer, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, so I think you might hear a dog in the background. Sorry about that.
That's
We'll
fine.
try to keep them quiet. Yeah, my name is Jennifer. I go by Jenna. I have two children, both with affected by dwarfism. Um, I started out parenthood a little bit later in life, and that was actually the biggest reason why I actually went to adoption to begin with. I was a little bit, it was close to the place where it probably wouldn't happen naturally if I really wanted it to. That was okay with me, given the fact that there's plenty of kiddos out there that need to have families. And so I said, sure, I'll look at adoption. And it actually worked out. It worked out very, very, very well for me. I work in the medical field, so I'm kind of I'm familiar with quite a bit of the resources that I would need to have available for any potential health issues. So I figured that wouldn't be a whole lot of an issue. And yeah, I was ready to start a family, and it just seemed like it would be a really good fit.
That's so awesome. That's wonderful. So, um, did you specifically seek out children with special needs, or did it just happen to work out that way?
Hey, it's kind of interesting. When you're doing adoption these days, more often than not, special needs is to be expected. Um, to begin with, any child that's adopted, you have to remember, is in some way negatively impacted. And so you always have to start with that piece. But in addition, many of the children, especially if you're looking at adopting internationally, many of the children that are available for adoption and or in orphanages tend to have special needs. Adoption is a little bit more common in some of those areas, so domestic adoption will happen, but it's much more likely to happen with children who are healthy or have no special needs that are identified. So the children with special needs are much more likely to be the ones that are available and or waiting. And even a child that's just been waiting for 3 years or more is considered special needs just because they've been waiting for so long. But then you consider, any kind of institutional sorts of impacts that happen. And so that will also come into play.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. How old were the kids when you adopted them?
So most of the time people think that because my son is older that I probably had him longer, but that's the odd thing, is that I've had my daughter for longer than I've had my son. So my daughter came home when she was 5. Um, and she had had time with foster family prior to coming. And then my son was actually listed as a 13-year-old when he came home. So he was getting very close to being at the place where he would miss out if he didn't get a chance to get a forever family. So I was really excited to be able to bring him home and get him set up with a family. We later adjusted his date of birth based on development and maturity levels and, those sorts of things. So he's actually back a couple of years than what he was listed as when he came home. But I kind of feel like, for him, even though there was a little bit of concern about adjusting that, I feel like it buys him a little bit of time to have a little bit more support and to gain the maturity and to develop before he has to get pushed out there and have expectations placed on him.
Yeah, that's really neat. I remember seeing that a post that you did about that when you readopted in
Mhm.
on the West Coast, and
Yeah.
that I'm not very familiar with adoptions in general, and so that was really interesting to me. But I can definitely see how that would benefit him. I mean, it's similar to like holding your kid back. Well, I don't want to sound insensitive, but it's similar to holding your kid back in grade school, because you feel like they just need, and not necessarily because they're failing or anything negative about
Mhm.
them, but just because you feel like they need just a little bit extra time.
More time. More
And
time.
of course, we can go on and on about societal standards and all that kind of thing too. So I think that's wonderful that you thought to do that. That's great. They seem like, I mean, they just seem like just wonderful kids, and I've obviously never met them, but they're just lovely. I just love watching them. Are they of both of the same nationality background?
So they're actually both Chinese, which
Okay.
is fantastic. I love that they have that in common. And the odd thing is that they're from completely different parts of the country. Um, and so they even spoke different language when they lived in China. So one was Mandarin, and the other one was uh, it was a dialect of Cantonese that he would speak. It was a regional dialect. But so even if they had met in China, they probably wouldn't understand each other, which is
Yeah.
really, really kind of a strange thing, and kind of cool too.
Yeah.
But I had to, I brought her home when she was 5. And I think it was 2 years later when I brought him home. I was actually in the process of adopting her, and I was still looking at information from the agency, and still seeing different listings and listings from other places. And it was very strange because I had been working on her adoption for a really long time. It took a year and a half to 2 years to get everything together, paperwork, finances, all of those fun things. And so, of course, I was kind of looking at what else was going on in the adoption world at the same time. And this one little guy kept turning up, and it was really strange because he turned up a couple of times on a couple different listings, and then I didn't find him for a little while. But then I saw a listing for another boy, and I said, "Gosh, this one that I've seen, if I could, I'd be interested in bringing him home because he seems like he really needs a family. But if that couldn't work out, maybe this other one would work out." Um, Strangely enough, it was the same kid. I figured out later on, but it was a different photo, and he was older in the later listings. Of course, he would be.
Yeah.
Um, but it ended up being the same kid. So I thought, oh my gosh, this is totally, totally, totally meant to be. And
Yeah.
it sort of was. And part of my interest in him, when I saw his initial listing, he was actually listed as a 9-year-old. And the photographer and their infinite wisdom, as much as nice as it was that somebody was taking nice photos and trying to make it something nice so that people would look and get to
Mhm.
know the child and maybe be interested. They had him sitting in a picture with a bunny rabbit. Like he looked like, like a little itty bitty kid. And I thought, the first thing I thought was, this kid is like 9 or 10, and he needs to have a football, not a little
Yeah.
stuffed bunny rabbit. And, and so I was like, what are they thinking? But because of his size,
Yeah.
they were sort of kind of
Mhm.
kind of playing to that. And I don't know if that they didn't understand in their mind how inappropriate that really probably was, or what. But all I could think was, oh my goodness, this poor little boy, he needs a football. you
Yeah.
know and then
Yeah.
later on, when I saw a picture, there was a picture of him. He had the greatest smile, and there in the information about him, it said, well, he hasn't had a whole lot of schooling because of his size. They chose not. They didn't think that it would be a great thing. They didn't think it was necessary because they didn't think
Mhm.
he would really go anywhere, and so
Mhm.
they weren't really worried about making sure he had his education. And all
Wow.
I could think when I saw, and that was the second little guy, the picture of the second listing, and I thought, he really needs to go to school. That little boy
Yeah.
needs to go to
Yeah.
school. He needs to, and then ultimately it ended up being the same guy. And I was just like, oh, I was so excited when I found out it was the same one.
Yeah.
And he's been the neatest to bring home. Both of them have been absolutely amazing. Oh, I have one who wants to say a quick hello.
Hi.
This is Zariah. Oh, she can't hear. Say hello. Hello.
We can't see you. Lean over a little bit more. Hi, pretty. How are you?
Good.
Good. I'm
How does this
Angela.
end? You gonna say anything? All right. Say, okay, I'm gonna see you later. Okay.
Bye.
She gets shy right
That's
away.
funny. I love it.
Yeah.
He really does have the best smile, though. He has such a great smile. I just love it.
Yeah, his personality actually really matches with that. He's got a lot of charisma, and it's been really kind of amazing. And I've kind of found that it's kind of interesting. So, I mean, back to whether or not I sort of had looked. I mean, of course I looked for special needs because that was sort of what we needed, or I needed to do in order to be able to adopt. I didn't at the outset know what I wanted to. Or would I be willing to or able to handle as a single parent? Um, but once I did some review and I some research, I said, I think I would a child with dwarfism would be just fine. I more often than not, I think it's more medical and physical needs as opposed to mental or emotional. Of course, it's all of the things of being small and being a little bit different because of that. But I thought, well, I'm really short. And I'm not a whole lot taller than the kids, and they like to tease me that I'm not much taller than some of the people with achondroplasia that we met at the at the national conference because I'm only 5 feet tall. But, the being short thing, I'm relatively close to being able to relate, but um, you know, I thought I think I can do this other piece, and I think it's more the whole day-to-day problem solving and that sort of thing. That's going to be more of an issue than anything. The
Mhm.
interesting thing, though, so when you're letting the adoption agency know what you think you'll be able to work with, and how you'll be able to see things play out, even with adopting within the world, within saying little people are possibly allowing for them to look for someone with dwarfism. I couldn't even say, I had to say to them, okay, sometimes there's some types of dwarfism I might not be able to work with. But I thought, okay, for example, if I were to adopt a child with osteogenesis imperfecta, brittle bone disease, it probably wouldn't
Mhm.
work out very well because I have a two-story home. All of
Mhm.
the bedrooms are upstairs. If that child broke a bone,
Yeah.
this would be a really difficult thing. Then, of course, sometimes with OI, just walking, you can break a bone.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
if we're doing up and down stairs all the time, that sort of thing, maybe that's not the best idea.
Mhm.
And so even though I was willing to say, a child with dwarfism might work out, I still had to be a little bit more specific and say, not somebody with OI or who might have a problem
Mhm.
like that, who wouldn't be able to use stairs on a regular basis.
Mhm. Mhm.
So even that could be limiting, which was an odd thing to have to come to terms with was even. And then in some ways it got a little bit tough because I kind of felt like, well, I'm not at Burger King. You can't have it your way. You can't just order up what you want. In some ways it seems like, am I really telling them these things? And then I was like, okay, I have to be like, I'm trying to be good about being honest about what could work and what might not work, and
Yeah.
I have to remember it's not that.
Right. Right.
It was an odd sort of, they were odd conversations to have
Mhm.
with the agency.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. But in the end, you just wanted the best fit for you and for them, and that is obviously what's ideal. Do both Soraya and Griffin have achondroplasia?
Both do,
Yeah.
yes. And one is affected a little bit more than the other in regards to, physical sorts of issues. And we've actually been really super lucky because both of them have actually been very healthy. And I didn't necessarily expect that. But we've been blessed. So, I know to expect that there will be times that we're going to have issues and that we're going to have to deal with the medical system, and it might be a little bit prolonged, that sort of thing. Knock on wood, we haven't had to yet, and we'll take it. We'll deal. We'll deal when we have to, but it's been nice that
Mhm.
we haven't had to.
Mhm. Mhm. Good, good. Yeah, we've been lucky, so far too. I haven't had any real issues, and then the girls haven't either. Except Aiden did have to have 8 plate surgery, but that's so minimal, compared to decompression or
Right.
the the more complicated leg surgeries and things like that. So
Yeah.
hopefully it stays that way for all of us.
Yeah, we did have a little scare. We were having some symptoms, and we went in and we talked to some practitioners, and they were considering, well, maybe decompression. I got a second opinion with somebody who was a little bit more experienced with dwarfism, and they said, no, we think we can totally hold off.
Yeah,
And I said,
yeah,
okay,
good.
yeah, I like those. I like that recommendation. Actually, it was somebody who works with the medical advisory board for LPA. We were lucky enough to be able to see them through Seattle Children's. And they said, no, according to these guidelines here, this is something that we don't have to worry about just yet.
Good, good. So speaking of LPA, how did you get involved with that? Were you involved from the beginning, or something kind of after a few years after you adopted, or?
So I got involved actually relatively soon. I actually, even before I brought Zariah home, who was the first that I brought home, I started doing research about dwarfism and the different sorts of things that I would need to know. And in order to actually get information, or have access to all the information that I wanted and needed, I had to join. And they were asking questions. Why do you want to be a member? And I was like, you don't have dwarfism. Okay, I'm in the process. And in some ways, I think that there was a little bit of a stigma attached to saying that. They were kind of like, because I think that sometimes other people, do research and potentially average height parents look into maybe adopting children with dwarfism. So it was a little bit slow to get a response back, but then they finally said, okay, sure, we'll welcome you. Um, and it was nice that they did. And it was, and I've met some really great people through LPA. Um, and some really great network of resources, and I can't say enough how helpful it is to have other people who are in the been there done that category sort of thing.
Mhm, mhm.
And I think, not just for the information that I can get, but for my kids and for their ability to have mentors and you know people that they can look up to, and just role models that they can see and say, hey, you know what, I can do that someday. Being that they came from a situation where they were kind of not really encouraged a whole lot. That was the first thing that I started doing, was saying, you need to look at some of these other little people and what they do, and how they conduct their lives, and you can do anything you want, and you can have anything you want, and you can be anything you want. And I hope that I can keep encouraging that with them, and I hope that LPA can continue to be there to help support them in that forever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We just got involved last year, and bummed that everything turned out the way it did this year, because we had plans of I went to 3 regionals last year, and it was just incredible. I was able to take the kids to 2, and just like the first time that we pulled up, we went to Fort Lauderdale. We drove 18 hours, went to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, for the first one, and we pulled in front of the hotel, and Aiden Aiden's looking out the window, and she's like, Mom, there's a boy. And she's not boy crazy or anything like that. She's still in the boys are yucky phase, even though she's almost 12. And so
Mhm.
I was like, yeah, there's a boy. Like, well, yeah. And it took me a minute to realize that she meant
An
a
LP
LP
boy.
boy, because she had
Yes.
never seen one. Because my
Yes.
mom, my sister, me, her sister, we're all girls.
Girls.
And when I realized that, it was just like, and then
Yeah.
Malika, she struggles with, she's 6, and she struggles with the identity of being a little person. She wants to be tall like her brother, like her dad.
Hmm.
And for her to see other girls her age that were her height or even smaller, because she's honestly kind of small for even for being achon,
Mhm.
was just it's just there's just not even words to
Mhm.
put to it. It's just such an incredible organization, and I love it when average height parents reach out to me to ask like my opinion or my thoughts on things. And not that I have, all the answers or anything, but I just appreciate that they're surveying others who look like their kids to kind of gather their thoughts about things, and not necessarily just have an echo chamber of other average height parents, being that 80% of the parents are average height, and all those Facebook
Mhm.
groups can be, more full of obviously of average height parents. So it's really neat how LPA can bring all of that together. So
The
hopefully.
experience level is so awesome to draw on from adult LPs. I'm disappointed sometimes when we don't have more adult LPs that come to our local events because really, truly, I feel like my kids are going to get so much more from spending time with them than a lot of times they can get with me. There's plenty that they can get from me, but there's so much they can get from others where who are in the same position that they're in. And
Mhm.
yeah, it makes a huge difference too when there are adults who are willing to put themselves out there and say, yes, I'm willing to be a role model, and yes, I'm willing to answer questions or befriend
Mhm.
your child and support them. And so that's extremely helpful.
Yeah, yeah. We just started our chapter in Mississippi, the first chapter in decades. And so we're really excited. We did a Halloween Zoom, and we have a Thanksgiving Zoom planned, and that's all we can do right now. But it's still nice
Yeah,
to like. I didn't realize that there were a
connect.
couple. I live on the coast, and there's a couple families that live right here on the coast that I had no
Never knew.
idea, because I've never seen them, and so and it's still sparse. Like, we don't have a huge community, but once we're able to hopefully get back to some sort of normalcy, and things have died down a little bit, then I look forward to being able to meet in person and connect with them and connect the kids
Mhm.
together, and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you jumped on that. I know that there was hesitancy because because of the weirdos that are out there, and people just trying to get in and be looky loos, and so I'm sure they were like, I don't know about you,
Know
lady."
about these. I know, I know, I know, and I, yeah, yeah, and so I had to kind of take a step back and say it's not really a personal thing. Probably, I did let them know that I was in the medical field, and I think that that was helpful. That they
Yeah.
understood a little bit that it wasn't just, seeing curiosity, and
Right.
so
Right.
that's always good. But they were good, and once they understood that it was not just that, then they were more than welcoming, so that's been very helpful in many ways.
Good. Good. So, both of your kids are of Asian descent, of Chinese descent specifically. Have
Mhm.
you found there to be specific struggles regarding their race and heritage as a parent?
um Not really. It's really interesting, and I kind of had an idea that it would probably be this way before they came home, but it seems like the fact that they're Asian seems to take a back seat. The LP thing is something that they deal with all day, every day, and so it really is truly what we deal with on a more regular basis. And not to say that we don't ever deal with the other pieces, it's just that it's not sort of an in your face sort of issue. And even, even when it's time for Chinese New Year or some of the other sorts of cultural things, the kids, sometimes they're interested and sometimes they're not, but it's not something, it's not real pressing for them typically, I think. Not like, the day to day, having to try and find ways to do things in order to just get by. Um, and so I totally get why it would be like that. And whatever works for them is fine with me. I just want to make sure that they're getting what they need, regardless.
Mhm. Mhm. That's awesome. Do you feel like so I've mentioned that Malika is like in this denial phase of being a little person, whereas my oldest has always been aware of it and owns it. Sometimes a little
Pretty
much,
much.
honestly.
It's okay.
But I'm letting her, she deals with it how she wants to. But and we don't really deal with any bullying or anything. Luckily, everybody loves the girls. Like
Mhm.
we've not had, we have every now and then somebody will say something, or but no actual like bullying and intimidating, constant picking on or anything like that. So we've been really lucky in that realm as well. Do you feel like your kids, do they own their dwarfism? Is it no big deal? Is it, what do you think?
It's funny because they're both in different stages. So I was really lucky to be able to be an observer as Zariah kind of actually first initially even realized that she was a little bit different, and
Mm-hmm.
then had to start processing what that meant and how it looked and how it what it might mean for her, how she might deal with that long term. And she still is, and I always have to take a step back and remember, even if she wasn't a little person, this is a time, because she's 12 now. This is a time when anybody would be dealing with significant issues about trying to find out who they are and what they are and who they're meant to be. And there's so many questions. So just add that LP thing into the mix, and it's extra confusing. But it's there's so many things that are sort of rolled up in that, but it was kind of interesting. And because when she first came home, she didn't ever really seem to even notice that she was different. um, and so I was kind of looking into, with LPA, different groups. I would speak to other parents about their experience, and it seems like somewhere around the age of 5 to 8 was average for kids to figure out. Well, maybe they looked a little bit different, and maybe they had to do things differently, and that was pretty much on the money for her. She, I don't know, first or second grade, she realized she wasn't growing nearly as much as her friends were. We went back to school and she was like, "Whoa!" um, and then she started, and really, for her, I mean, she didn't. I don't think she felt different herself. It was the reactions of people that were not in her family or outside of her circle, that really had more impact on her awareness than anything. Because otherwise, she just would go about her business and do her thing. So, it
Mm-hmm.
didn't really seem to phase her. Um, and so, little by little, she's been working on it. And things are up and down. There's days that she says, "I wish I wasn't little," and then there's days that she says, "I'm glad that I'm little." And we'd much rather be too little than too tall. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
um and all day every day we work on different adaptations, things to get things done that have to be done. My son, on the other hand, by the time that he came home, he had already gone through much of that processing, and he knew he was little, and that, well, I'm little and that's all there is to it, sort of thing. And he's just really generally very accepting of where he's at. I don't think he's not always happy about where he's at, and I know that he feels out of place sometimes, or in different sorts of situations. There's times that it's much more likely that he'll be anxious or feel like he's out of place. And I think both of my kids are much more wary of situations where they know that there's going to be a lot of people, or there's going to be a lot of new people, maybe. So, like in school, if they go to, if they're in with a group of kids that already know them, then it's no problem. But if they know that they're going to be in with a new class, then it's going to be a problem because people don't know them, and so it's more likely that they might have some issues with people maybe not treating them as nicely, maybe staring, maybe making comments, pointing, talking behind their backs, that sort of thing. And they're pretty aware of when those things are happening and when we go out in public. And we have had to deal with a little bit of bullying issues at school, unfortunately, despite the fact that I have really great kids that most people really love. Um, just about everybody loves them actually when they meet them. But we had to go to the school and say, "Yep, there's a child that's insisting on causing some issues and restricting movement and those sorts of things, and this needs to be addressed." So those things do happen. Both of my kids um are pretty aware, and the odd thing is that their threshold is often much greater than mine for dealing with what sorts of comments and things are going to happen. They know people are going to look at them when we go out in public. I don't always feel so comfortable with it. Um, and I feel like we're a circus sideshow sometimes because there's so many people looking. Like everywhere we go, there's people looking, and maybe following us, and peeking around corners to look again, and that sort of thing. I think my daughter has, well, both of them, they do have a higher threshold. So generally, by the time they complain, um, it's probably a lot. If it was me, then I would be going, oh my gosh, because it's really a lot. So when they do say something to me, then I have to take it very seriously.
Mhm.
Um, but on the flip side, we're sort of also getting into that stage where we're, it's middle school time, and we're getting a lot more self-conscious, and now, we're getting really uncomfortable with the looks and stares again. That there's a heightened sense of awareness. So we go through seasons of this, and then also that I've noticed that there's different abilities to tolerate based on lots of different things. Like if I'm having a bad day already and something happens, then forget it, I'm done. But if I'm having an okay day, I slept good, no worries, then I'm just kind of like, oh, just ignore them, kind of thing. So there's also a tolerance level, and it's, I mean, the same person, but it's like even my reaction sometimes is way
Yeah.
different. And so I know when they have different reactions that I have to take a
Mhm.
step back and say, oh, wait a minute, it's,
Mhm.
is it out of the realm of okay, or no, not necessarily.
Mhm.
It's just in context a lot of times.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and they're kids. They're humans, and then preteen, teenage kids at that, and that is, I mean, that comes with a whole
Slew of things.
gumbo, yeah, as it is, without any additional things. And so I can definitely understand that. Was the school receptive to handling the bullying situation?
They were surprisingly receptive. The interesting thing was that my daughter had said something, and I asked her to address it very specifically with the adults involved. And then the next time she said something to me, I had to go to the administration and say, okay, I've done my part. She's talked to me. I've asked her to go back and speak to the adults. Now there's still problems. Now you need to address it. And they actually did. And they came back, and they spoke to some other students that were in the mix, and the other students were just, they were besides themselves with some of the things that were happening. They were that upset about some of the things, and they said, yes, there is a problem, and yes, we will deal with it. So they did. The other piece that came out of that was my daughter and I developed a little presentation so that she could introduce herself to the other kids, because we felt like if we took control about the information, and allowed questions and responses, allowed for them the natural curiosity to happen
Mhm.
and answer the questions as they came out, that we would do much better in general. So literally, we came up with a little presentation. She came up with, information about herself, and then she presented to everybody in her grade and the next grade lower, allowed the kids to ask questions. And the kids didn't even really, most of them already knew her, so they didn't have a ton of questions, hard questions. But it was a great way for us to kind of get a little bit more comfortable with things, and more comfortable with helping other kids to understand who she is and where she's at. And yeah, it'll allow for us to do more of that later on. And I feel like, you know, even though they may not want to be in this position, they're sort of in this position where they'll have to educate others always
Mhm.
in order to be able to feel comfortable about where they're at and what's happening for them. So
Mhm.
I just, instead of having them feel uncomfortable with it, or upset, or disappointed, I want them to feel confident with that, and be able to sort of kind of meet the challenge head on, and just be able to kind of come out and do the job, and then go about their business and live their lives and do what they need to do in order to be happy living beings.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's great. That's a great great, I don't want to say lesson, but great skill for them to learn to control the narrative and to, to be able to tell their story and hold the power in that. So that's awesome. That's really great. So do you is there anything that you would want someone who is interested in adopting that you feel like they should know that you maybe learned along the way that you had no idea or that could benefit them?
Oh gosh. Well, I will say I had no idea how awesome it was going to be beforehand. I mean, it just, you know, it's a really hard thing. It's a hard thing to become a parent. It's a hard thing to bring in, bring people into your family that weren't there before. But it has been probably it's been the biggest blessing ever. And the kids are absolutely wonderful and more than I ever wanted or expected. Um, I wish that they're so I know that with the adopting process, and especially with little people. Um, One of the hopes with LPA is to help LPs who are hoping to build families to be able to adopt and that sort of thing. I would love it if there were more LPs who were able to offer families to some of the little people, because I do think that it's true that having someone in your family who's similar to you is extremely helpful. Now, I think having a family in general is the most important thing. um I mean, first best would be to have people who are like you in the family, but if that can't happen, having a family, even of average height people,
Mhm.
it's still an okay thing, because we all need a tribe. We all need people who we can turn to when things are hard, and who will always be there to love and support and guide us, regardless. And but it would be so awesome if there were a way for LPA to be able to have the ability to assist more LPs in the adoption process, so that more of these kids could come home and have families.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that LPA does do a lot with that, and provides grants sometimes to help make that happen. I think that's incredible.
Mhm.
And I agree. Obviously a home is better than no home, but I can see how I do. I would love. I mean, I have 3 kids and I'm a single mom, so I don't see myself doing it, but I would love to see that happen. More often. I think. Imagine it has to be particularly hard for. I mean, being in that process as a child is got to be just hard in general, obviously, but
Mhm.
being a little person and feeling maybe that being the reason why you aren't being chosen has got to be particularly tough, and not
Mhm.
having that support, and then also not having the true medical care that they may need, not getting the assistance that they need
Mhm.
as extensively as they could if they had a family. So I think that's a great point to make. And I know that a lot of people don't know that LPA does offer some grants sometimes, and I don't know what the stipulations or how that
Mhm.
works, but I've seen it be offered for specific children who are in need. So.
Yeah, they do offer grants for many LPs, and then also for the children who are closer to the age of 14, who are dangerously close to losing their ability to get a forever family. There's a little bit of a higher grant that's available. It would be so awesome if there was a way that they could. I mean, if there was any other way that they could help assist people with other things that might be necessary in order to help get the kids home, whether it be, teach them how to do fundraising, or help them with, adaptations in the home that would allow them to pass a home study, for example, for their agency, or, anything like that, that might make it a little bit easier for a family to be able to bring some of these kids home. Because once they age out, if they don't get a family, then it's going to be that much more difficult for them, because many times they're not afforded the same opportunity as children who don't have special needs.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great points. Um, and who knows, maybe in the future something like that will be able to be developed. So that would be
Mhm.
awesome. All right, so we are right about 30-ish minutes. I don't know how long, but
Yeah,
we're
it's close.
yeah. So I always like to close out with this question. Typically it's targeted to an LP, but it is targeted to you about your children. What is the most, ridiculous, absurd thing that somebody, or even funny thing that somebody has said or done regarding your children?
Oh gosh. Oh, it just depends on the day that you ask, honestly. There's all sorts of things that can happen. Oh my goodness. There's been some days that it's been, really negative, and then there's other days that it's been positive. I remember one of the first times that that my little one was with me at the local library. I had somebody, literally walk up to me and say, "Is that a M word?" And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 wait a minute. That's a little girl." That's a little girl. That's
Oh,
but it was an odd sort of thing, and I wasn't prepared at all. And I just, oh, goodness. But my kids have been so good about responding to different things, that they've they've been more of a role model to me, I think, in so many ways. And one of the things that I think about a lot of times is that many of the LPs that I know have been born with a little extra something to make up for the height that they didn't get. Usually it's personality. And it just is, it's kind of amazing how that happens, but they deserve it because they have to make up for it. And so, I mean, and I think the more I look at it, the more it seems true with people who are a little bit different. They've got something else in order to make up for it, whether it's a little bit extra brain power, a little extra charisma. I don't know, but it happens. And my kids both were given that. They're both, just incredible. They're incredibly sweet kids to be around. You get to know them and you can't help but like them.
mhm, mhm.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. I've had more than one average type parent that, just in conversation, and like they'll post something and I'll comment on it, and something super cute, and they'll say, she's just so full of personality. I'm like, yeah, I can tell. They're like, is that like, I feel like that just comes with being a little
The
person. I'm
package.
like, you know what? I really feel that too. Like it's just I'm and I don't know, like, it
It's part
doesn't
of the
make sense
package.
scientifically, but it truly, when we look at our kids, they're just so just just,
Mhm,
cute, and, so much personality and wit and charisma. Like they're the best. Like
mhm,
it's really neat. It's
mhm.
awesome. It's really
Yeah,
awesome. So,
it is good stuff.
well, I'm so glad that you took that path, and that, the universe put those babies into your home, because I know that they have an amazing mother, and I am so grateful to be your Facebook friend, and I can't wait for the day where we finally get to meet and see each other, whenever things, I don't know. So so
One day.
yeah, one day, one
One
day.
day.
We'll just leave it at that. So, but thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate it. And hopefully, it helps, because I'm sure people have questions about adoption and have thought about it. And hopefully this helps kind of guide them in the right direction for them. And if anybody has any questions, just post them in the comments, and, either of us are happy to answer, depending on who it's targeted to, obviously. And, yeah, so thank you again, Jenna. I just am so grateful. This was a lovely conversation, and hope you have a wonderful evening and a great week.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jenna.